Well, welcome to Think Like a Champion, a podcast dedicated to helping you win in every way and enjoy every day. We're going to get right into the content today. I want to talk to you about conquering stress and distress. Stress and distress. And we're taking this from a passage of Scripture in 1 Samuel chapter 22 when it says, "And everybody that was distressed and everyone that was in debt and everybody that was discontented came to David, and he became captain over them." And so what we're learning is these three things are what plague every human being at one point or another. We deal with distress, we deal with debt, we deal with discontent. So we have issues that we have to conquer in our emotions, conquer in our finances, conquer in our contentment and happiness, and our pursuit of that. And God has wired us to be conquerors. He's wired us to be champions. We are more than conquerors because of Jesus' love for us. But we have to become captain over the things that are trying to hold us captive. We can either be the captain or the captive, as I've mentioned over the last couple of weeks. We are called to be the captains over our lives. Like David became the captain over every one of these men that were in debt, distress, that were distressed, in debt, and discontented. He became captain over them. We're a David. David is an example of us. We are to be captains over distress, captains, authority over debt, over discontentment, okay? And we are called by God to be this. We were created to be conquerors rather than be conquered. So I think really getting a hold of distress and stress, because that is a powerful tool that the enemy uses to keep us down and keep us defeated and make us sick. Some of the things about, if I could just tell you some things about distress and stress. But before I get there, no, let me go ahead and say that actually, because distress is a narrow place. The definition of the word distress, a narrow place, confinement, anguish, to be oppressed, to press against, extreme anxiety. It means sorrow or pain, anguish, suffering, pain. Anybody been through any of that? Agony, torment, heartache, heartbreak, the state of being in great trouble. I think everybody knows what it's like to have mental strain and stress or any kind of trouble. And the definition of stress, trouble, distress, strife, pressure, heavy weight or difficulty, stirred, agitated, disturbed, confused, pressure coming from the outside gets on the inside and turns into depression and begins to distress us. Let me say that again. Pressure comes from the outside. It gets into the inside and it turns into depression and begins to distress you and stress you out. And listen, here's some of the signs of stress. We're going to attack this today. We're going to attack stress and distress, but here's some of the signs of stress. Forgetfulness, if you're experiencing any bit of that, then that's a sign of stress. I'm trying to remember what point I'm on, just kidding. Forgetfulness. Temper is another sign of stress. Chronic fatigue is a sign of stress. Cynicism, negativity, a sense of helplessness, never seeming to feel like you're accomplishing anything. Constant illness, headaches, tension, migraines, high blood pressure, heart disease. These are the causes of stress. These are caused by stress. These are the symptoms of stress. Stress is at the root of these symptoms. And if we deal with the root, we can deal with the fruit. Really, it starts with dealing with the root. We're cutting this thing from the root. We know that we're going to have trouble in life. We know that Jesus even said in John 16:33, in this world you're going to have trouble. But he said, take courage, I've overcome the world. And Psalm 34, verse 19 says, many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. Many are the afflictions or distresses of the righteous. Distress causes stress. 2 Corinthians 4:8 says, we're troubled on every side, yet not distressed. In other words, trouble on the outside doesn't have to distress us. It doesn't have to, it doesn't have to take control of us. It doesn't have to control us. We can control it. We can't let stress force us into making a premature decision or a wrong decision just to alleviate the stress. We got to get control of this another way, and I'm going to show you how. Some of the causes of stress: uncertainty. Are you dealing with any uncertainty right now in your life? This is one of the forces that causes stress. Unresolved conflict. So I have it broken down as these words that start with a U. We've got uncertainty, number one. Unresolved conflict, number two. Unrealistic comparisons, number three. That's huge. That's so big. Man, if I was going to go off on a rant, it would be on this one point: unrealistic comparisons. We have got to stop comparing ourselves to people. We have got to wake up from this comparison trap that the enemy is set for us. The devil loves when we compare ourselves with each other and with other people, and compare ourselves with social media people, and compare ourselves at our worst with people at their best, or compare ourselves at our worst with people that are just a little bit better off than we might feel. And we got to stop comparing ourselves, because it's just a door we got to shut and lock and throw away the key. It's not something we should dabble in. We shouldn't even dabble in comparing ourselves. Anytime I find myself starting to say something or ask a question or think of something in a way as a comparison to somebody else, I catch myself. I don't always stop it immediately, but I'm getting better at that. We all struggle with that, but we got to not worry about who has more likes, who has more fans, who has more friends, who has more church members, who has more money. Like, none of that should be in control. That is a cause of stress. Unrealistic comparisons. Unthankfulness is another cause of stress. Gratitude has found medically to be an antidepressant and an anti-anxiety force. Philippians chapter 4, verse 6 and 7 says, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything with prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, make your requests known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, shall guard your heart and mind in Christ Jesus." When we take the time to ask what we're grateful for, there are certain neural circuits activated in our brain. There's chemicals that are produced in our brain. Gratitude produces, it's been found, produces dopamine and serotonin. These are the neurotransmitters that travel through the neural passageway of the happy center, the pleasure center of the brain. It's called the bliss center, some people call it. It's just God wired us this way. Gratitude is a powerful antidepressant, anti-stress force. So employ it, deploy it, use it. Remember, thankfulness, Paul listed in the Bible thanklessness as one of the signs of the end times. I guess we're in the end times because we're in a world of a lot of ingratitude and unthankfulness. And we have a lot. And most of us have a lot. Even if you have a little, you have a lot. We have breath, we have life, we have opportunities, we have family. If we don't have family, we have a church family, or we can have a church family. If we don't have a family, we can have a church family. Maybe your family is broken up. Maybe your family has such strain on it right now, and you feel distant from all your family members. If you can resolve conflict with them, go for it. If for some reason you're not able to, if you do everything you can, the Bible says, as much as it has to do with you, be at peace with all men. If you can resolve conflict with people, do it. Do it before the sun goes down. I like to practice that. If there's something I need to resolve with somebody, something unresolved, I like to get it done now rather than later, because otherwise it'll add stress and pressure, and then it just boils over sometimes and causes bad decisions and causes physical ailments and sickness too. So how do we deal with this? How do we deal with distress? So let me break this down for you in 1 Samuel chapter 30. So we read in 1 Samuel chapter 22 about how all these people came to David in distress, in debt, and discontentment. And then what happened was David made an army of these men, and they began to defend their people and protect their land and protect their families and protect their country, their city, Ziklag. While they were out in battle, one of their enemies came and burned down their city and took captive all of their family members. And so it brings us to 1 Samuel chapter 30, where I'm going to give you a breakdown of what will deliver you from stress and distress. It says in verse 1 of 1 Samuel 30, "Now when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day, the Amalekites had made a raid against the city of Ziklag. They had overcome Ziklag and burned it with fire and taken captive the women and the children who were in it, both small and great. They didn't kill anyone, but they carried them off and kidnapped them, essentially, and went their way. And when David and his men came back to their city, they found it burned with fire, their wives and their sons and daughters taken captive, and now David is distressed. He is experiencing the height of stress and distress and depression and anxiety. What am I going to do? Not only has my family been kidnapped, but all of my soldiers' family members are kidnapped, and all of our homes have been burned down. They burned the city. And it says, David and the people who were with him raised their voices and wept until they had no more strength to weep. David's wives were taken captive, and David was greatly distressed. I find that verse particularly pertinent to us. He was greatly distressed. And the people spoke of stoning him because all the people were bitter of soul because of their sons and their daughters. And what does it say? It says, but David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. David encouraged himself. David started out distressed, and he encouraged himself in the Lord his God. So I want to break this down, some simple steps that you can take in your life right now, following the pattern that David gives us to break out of living in distress, living in stress. Let's break it down. Number one, it says, and David wept until there was no more strength in him left to weep. So my first step that I want to encourage you to take whenever you feel distressed or stressed, get emotional. Like, let it become emotional to you. Let your emotions out. Let them out. Get emotional and let it all out. Let out the tears. Get a good cry out. Like, express your emotions. Don't bottle them up. This causes stress. Stress, when you bottle up your emotions after being distressed or stressed, it begins to break down your immune system, and it breaks down your physical health. It breaks down your relationships. So because if we suppress our emotions when we feel distressed and stressed out, if we suppress those emotions, they are going to come out in ways that we wish they wouldn't. They're going to come out against our family members or our friends or the people close to us. We're going to start lashing out. So I believe we should get ahead of the outbursts of anger and fear that come from distress by getting emotional and just having a good cry or a shout. You go somewhere where nobody can hear you and just shout as loud as you can. Cry out to God, God, help me, God, deliver me. I mean, I've done that. There's real freedom in that. getting emotional and letting it out is a powerful outlet, and it's a powerful release. It's like a release valve, and it lets out all that pressure and all the stress. Just crying for a minute, just letting it out for a minute, shouting loud, crying out to God, praying loud to God. You don't have to be loud, but I'm just saying, you gotta let your emotions out. You gotta get emotional. You've gotta, like, you think, oh, I'm not that emotional. No, that usually, because everybody has emotions, but we suppress them. And then they come out in the wrong ways after that. So let it out, get it out. Get alone and just express it out. I like to just go to God. God, I'm just mad about this. I'm afraid about this. I'm distressed about this. And have a talk with him or talk to yourself. But get it out. Get emotional, number one. Number two, realize that people will turn on you in tough times. I think my wife was reading one of the students' response to one of the questions that she asked one of her students, or all of the students, was write down something that you have never been thankful for, but you are now thankful for. And one person said, I'm thankful for the people that let me down because they taught me to trust God. I'm thankful for the people that let me down. You know, there are going to be people that let you down in tough times. And this will set you free from stress, is when you realize that people will let you down. It says about all the people that were David's mighty men, they were grieved, they were contentious, they were mad at their leader, they were ready to rebel against him. They turned on him. And people can turn on you. And you gotta realize that in advance, and realize that when you're stressed out, people aren't gonna always be there for you, and they're not always gonna be what you thought they were gonna be. So realize that people will turn on you in tough times sometimes. Not everybody turns on you, and not everybody at one time. But in the tough times, sometimes that happens, and it'll set you free from stress when you embrace that reality that I'm not gonna be disappointed by people disappointing me. I'm gonna be ready for that. I'm going to trust God not to disappoint me. I'm gonna stop relying on people. It stresses your relationships, and it distresses you when you are needing that person to come through for you in your tough times. Number three, which leads to number three, don't wait for someone else to bail you out. Don't wait for someone else to bail you out. When you're under stress, don't look to anybody else to rescue you. You have the power to rescue yourself, you and God. You have the power, and which leads me to the next point. Go to God. And we find that David did this. He was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him. So people turned on him. Even the closest people to him turned on him. And what did David do? They were all bitter, so what did he do? He strengthened himself in the Lord his God. He took responsibility for himself. It says he encouraged himself. Sometimes encouragement from others is really powerful and meaningful, but there are moments when it's not going to come from anybody else. You got to encourage yourself. You've got to talk to yourself. You've got to build yourself up, because not everybody's going to be ready to do that or able to do that, and you can't be waiting for them. Don't be waiting around for them to do that. Build yourself up. Take responsibility for your own encouragement. You hear me? You got to take responsibility for it's good to surround yourself with encouragers, but you have to be an encourager, and you have to be an encourager of yourself in the toughest times. And then the next thing that David did was he went to God. Not only did he strengthen himself and encourage himself in the Lord his God, but then he asked God, what do I do Do I pursue the enemy? Do I overtake them? And God said, yes, pursue them and you will overtake them and you will recover all. So what did David do when he was stressed out? He got emotional. He let all his emotions out. Then he realized as guys turned against him, he realized people are going to turn against him. He took responsibility for himself. He didn't wait for somebody else to bail him out. He encouraged himself, and then he went to God for wisdom. Boy, this will get you free from stress. Go to God and ask him for wisdom. Ask him what to do. Say, I don't know how God's going to speak to me. Well, you got to ask him first. I don't know, is God going to speak to me in a voice? Is he going to speak to me by sending somebody across my path? Yes, 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 and yes. He's going to find a way to get to you. If you invite him into the situation, he is going to find a way. He knows how to get to you. He knows your address. He knows your phone number. He knows how to get a hold of you. He knows your Instagram account. God will get a hold of you if you go to God. Go to God. You want to be encouraged? You want to get out of stress and distress? Go to God. You want to be free from stress and go to God. You want to be free from being stressed out? Go to God. You want to set yourself free from being distressed? Go to God. You want to get out of this anxious place that's closing in on you? Go to God. And then you know what David did? He took his place as a priest and a king, and he asked for this breastplate called the ephod. And he put on this ephod. It was like this vestment that had two shoulder straps in it, attachments that secured the breastplate, worn with a waistband for the high priest. And he was now like dressed as a priest. We have to realize that Revelation chapter 1, verse 5 and 6 tells us that Jesus loved us, and then he washed us in his blood, and then he made us kings and priests. We have to realize that we are priests. We have the authority to go and stand before God and get his help and have the breastplate of righteousness to protect our heart from failing and our heart from overstressing and defeating itself. We put on that breastplate of righteousness knowing that we can stand before God without guilt, and we can stand before our trouble without condemnation and without guilt and without shame, that we literally can take our place in the midst of trouble as a king ruling over that trouble and as a priest that can stand in the face of that trouble and bless people anyway and go to God anyway and not try to take from others, but be like a priest that blesses others. And this frees you from stress when you start blessing other people, because that's what priests did. They spoke a blessing. They released blessing over people. Release blessing and speak blessing over others, even if they're your enemies. Speak blessing over them, and you're going to find yourself free from stress. And this is a game changer for me. Follow these steps, these simple steps, one by one. And you can deploy any of these steps in any order and at any time. But these are hacks to stress and distress in your life. Wow. Thank you for listening, taking time to spend with me on this podcast. Thanks for joining me on Think Like a Champion. My goal really is to bring you valuable, quality content in a short period of time. We're up against that time now, so I just want to thank you and help you know that you are a winner, you are a champion. If this brings value to you, if this encourages you, do me a favor and subscribe to the podcast and share it. And share this with someone you know. If you post on social media, tag me so I can see it and reshare it. And also, I want to invite you to support this podcast financially, support this ministry that sponsors this podcast, Life Changers Church. Support this ministry, Gregory Dickow Ministries, whichever avenue you want to go through. Support it. If you believe in what we're doing and you want to help me bring positive change in other people's lives, sow a gift, plant a seed, a gift of any amount. You can go to lifechangerschurch.com/give. And these things really help us. These moments really help us to help a lot of people. And I could use your help. And pay it forward, won't you? and plant a seed and give. And thank you for those of you that support this ministry with your generosity. I can't thank you enough. And I want to encourage you to get a copy of my book, Soul Cure. If you've heard, that came out over the last few weeks, love to get a copy of it into your hands. So make sure you can find it anywhere online. And thanks again for joining me today. I can't wait to see you next time on Think Like a Champion.